Hi, I'm Dianna Campbell, and welcome to my show, Dianna. Okay, okay. I'm not smiling. Okay, I'm too serious. Kind of. I forgot one. Bob in the community human rights involved advocate. Join me and my exciting guests while we discuss business, education, technology, media, and politics. Get to know me, Dianna, a proud survivor of cancer and founder of BETM Consulting. I'm a passionate and involved human rights and community advocate. Join me on Dianna, and I will see you the next time. Hi, welcome to Talk with Dianna Survivor. I have a great guest on today, Dr. Lenora Fulani. Dr. Fulani, I met her at Castillo Theater. On one of my shows, I had Dan Freeman, the artistic director of Castillo Theater. I take classes over there, and I am so elated that she is my guest today, and I'm really nervous because I've been asking her to come for 2 years, but she's just, now she's here. How are you, Dr. Fulani?
I'm quite well, and I'm also very honored that you invited me until I got here, and I'm glad to be here with you.
Okay, thank you. You are just awesome, and I did not realize, even though I'm on the political parties and been an activist pretty much all my life, I didn't know you had ran for president.
I ran twice.
And you ran twice.
Yeah, in 88 and 92. And it was quite an experience. I ran as an independent. I'm also, as you probably know now, the first black and woman to get on the ballot in all 50 states. And I ran to continue the building of a political movement so that we weren't locked into a two-party system.
Okay.
And it was wonderful to do.
Okay. So is it because that no one's talking about you because you ran on an independent party and not a Democrat or a Republican party? And kind of, can you tell my audience, because a lot of the audience don't understand or do not know about the different parties, okay? And especially there's a lot of things in the news with the independent parties now, the IDC, versus the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. To me, it's like it's in the middle. But can you explain it more?
Well, a lot of people in the country don't belong to either of the two major parties. And we were running to build a political movement that wasn't so institutionalized and tied to the powers that be and the status quo. And there are lots of, there are millions of independents in the country. They're not necessarily part of a party per se, but they've chosen to step outside of the two-party system because it literally doesn't deliver in a lot of different ways. And people want other choices. And for years, I mean, I ran in 88, and prior to that, independence existed. I think many of us would be fine if there were no parties at all. You could go to, the ballot, to the polling booth and vote for whomever you wanted. But you're not locked into a political party per se.
I think that would be better. I mean, because there's a stigma. And what's going on in the country now, we have a president just that was neither. I don't even know either or. And I think a lot of people didn't vote, and that's the reason why. And it's not just a point that they didn't pick a party or not. I think they're just fed up with the system or not educated enough to know, or just don't vote. We have a lot of people that don't vote at all,
Well, I think there's a relationship, which is why I'm an independent and worked for years and continue to work to build other choices. I think there's a relationship between the limited number of choices between the traditional two parties and why people don't vote, because people have voted over and over again. Coming out of the black community, when we got the right to vote, we went for it. But if you don't have a choice that literally, once elected, fights for you, that has an impact on whether or not you keep going back to the polls and voting within the same sort of institutionalized parties. So I don't think it's because people don't want power. I think they've been disappointed in what they've gotten.
More disappointed.
Yeah. And you can have a voting process that doesn't involve parties. It could be, you know, people getting on the ballot, et cetera, et cetera. Because when it's tied to a party, a lot of times it's in the interest of the party, not what's best for the public.
Right, and then you have some corruption, which is going on right now.
It's been going on for a long
and
time.
It's been going on forever.
Right.
You know, people want to refer this now to the Watergate, and it goes from the beginning of time, I believe, and to satisfy what other people think. They want to think that just the way the things are now with our country, it just happened. I think because we have social media now, that people see things more, you know, and it's more prevalent to hear about it because it's in your face. So, especially with the social media. I've been very involved with the Democrat Party since in the last 4 years in recovering from my cancer. And I, being not from New York, I just came to New York to shop, and I worked on Wall Street, and that was just my end of being here, but I never got involved into the politics of the city. But I am so in awe, and especially my passion is education, and the education here in New York is it's just really bad, you know. And I didn't realize till last year they didn't even have African American studies in the schools, which is a bill now, you know. And why should you have a bill? I don't know. That should just be a given. Give the children some books, okay? Teach it, you know. So that's the big thing too. And I just been working through the system and seeing what's going on, especially with people of color in the city. I feel the city have really built imprisonment around people of color, and that includes not just education and also in the housing and how they are living. It's just systematic of history of all this horrible things, and I hear nightmares, and it's just like, where did that come from? But this city has built this to be the way it is. So we're going to talk about one of the housing situations, which is on the news now, and finally, they act like, oh, this just happened, you know. And we're going to be talking about the NYCHA. And I know you're working on that, so let's talk about this NYCHA program you're doing.
Well, one thing is that I've spent the last, 3 decades or so building a broad and deep relationship here in New York and also in about 5 or 6 other cities with poor communities, predominantly of color, and get a tremendous amount of support from all kinds of people. In fact, our supporters, the people who have invested in us, have come from the business community, and a lot of them are white and wealthy and rich and across the board. And we've built that. We've built the All Stars Project. We are in, I guess, 6 cities. We have this beautiful, beautiful building on 42nd Street where we provide opportunities to both young people and then adults in the communities have said to me oftentimes, Dr. Fulani, would you do to me what you're doing to my kids, which is basically exposing them to a bigger world. So we also created a university-like setting within that process. And we've done it as a way to broaden the experiences that poor kids in poor communities of color have, so that they have more access. Because literally they live, within the 6-block radius of wherever they grew up, and they don't come into the city because there was no reason to do so, because there was no place to be. So we are currently on 42nd Street here, and the young people get on trains and buses and they travel in, and they realize that the world is bigger and that their world can be bigger, and we've organized programs so that they get internships on Wall Street and Madison Avenue, and they're exposed to the city in ways that they never would have been. And like I said, we're in 5 other places doing that.
And you mean the other cities? Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that.
That's important because otherwise you sort of just live here and then you don't know how to navigate the rest of the world. So it helps them become more sophisticated, and it helps our wealthy and a lot often white, but a broad array of people, but a lot of them are white business people, become more intimately connected to this population also. So it's been really powerful and important, and I think it adds something to the cities that we're in.
Yeah, I've been, like I said, I take classes over at Costilla and the UX All-Stars, and I just, it's just so wonderful.
Good.
You know, I mean, you have a lot of kids there, and they're doing very well.
Yeah, and we don't go after the, quote, best and brightest. We go into the poor communities. Whoever the kids are that sign up, we take them in. We don't give them a test. We give them the opportunity to come out of the community and be on 42nd Street and learn about the city and the country, the world basically, in ways that they're just not exposed to. It's a big deal, and I'm really, really pleased to have been able to do this.
Well, you guys are doing a great job, because I've been to some of the shows there that with the kids participating, and you have given awards. I've been to some of the awards. I mean, this is like I've been living there for the last 4 years. And I can't wait for Performing the World again this year. That was just awesome, and that's something that everyone should get participated. So do look up UX All-Star Performing the World. I believe it's September.
Sometime in September.
Sometime in September.
If you look up the All-Stars Project and you call us, we'll tell you everything that we're doing.
Right, and that's a beautiful program. And also, you also have Cops and Kids.
Yes, you want me to talk about that?
Yes, I do, because this is something that we are talking about around the communities, but they don't talk about UX doing this. You know, you don't even hear it. But you have a lot of children in this program.
Well, 2006, in response to the Sean Bell shooting, we sat down and tried to figure out, given that the poor communities need cops, and when cops come into the community, who is there are the kids a lot on the streets, you know, and obviously their families. We wanted to figure out a way to impact that relationship, because it's not like the community is saying, take away the cops, because there's a lot of poverty, and poverty you end up in all kinds of situations. So we wanted to help navigate that relationship, and I knew a lot of police officers because I've been, you know, in the streets a lot. I've been to a lot of protests.
Oh yeah, Dan Freeman told me how you guys got started with the Costilla and UX, and you
so
guys
we've
were
been
on the street.
protesting a
You
lot.
guys was totally boogie down Bronx and all the community protesting on the street for a long time. You know?
I knew officers, and I met with them over the years, and at some point signed a relationship statement between us and the NYPD, because their cops were getting trained, and that continues to be the case. They're exposed to the community in a different way. We've done major events at the Apollo where the entire entering class, the graduating class of different semesters for the NYPD were in the audience. We did a number of these at the Apollo Theater and throughout the city. And it's been wonderful, and we've done probably close to 200 individual workshops throughout the city. I've trained other people to do them, where the officers and the young people have an opportunity to sit down, have conversations, say what it is that they want to say to the other. And then we have particular ways of helping them to have more intimate conversations and learn more about who they are. I have the young people talk about their poverty, because there's a way in which people act like poor people are not poor, but a lot of the kids in our communities are poor, and I know about this because I grew up in poverty, and what their lives are like. And then the officers get to share with the kids what their lives are like, what it means to leave home and leave your kids and your wife and not know you're coming back, whether or not you're going to be able to come back.
Exactly.
So they develop a conversation, and it's pretty powerful. And we also are very committed to people being able to perform together in ways that are not what you normally do. They do these ridiculous skits together, and then they start laughing together. And it creates an environment that you can impact on. And as I've said to people over the years, it's not as if the community is saying, get rid of the police officers, because there are crimes committed in our communities and people want the cops.
Right.
So the issue is how the community can come together in that way, or in a way that is progressive with cops and that moves, basically reduces some of the tension between the two groups. So it's kind of marvelous to walk into one of our workshops and feel the tension, and the kids are looking at me or whoever's running it like, what are you doing? And the cops too, and watch them go through this process. It's been helpful, and it was in response to the Sean Bell shooting, the 50 shots many years ago.
But you guys have a way to mix art education with your whole theme, and the skits you're talking about, which is improv and different ways to break the ice between.
Well, we believe in performance,
yes,
that people don't have to be just who they are,
right,
that there are ways that you can be other than who you are. And performance is a wonderful tool for helping people to break out of their, characters and ways that they think of themselves, their personalities, and do some interesting and powerful things. Performance is very, very useful, sometimes even better than trying to have a conversation. When people perform together, they discover both new things about themselves and also new ways of communicating with each other.
Okay, so about how many children in the program, and what are their age groups?
Oh my goodness, I started doing this in 2006.
Okay.
So there have been, we've gone through thousands of kids in a variety of different places and ways, and officers. The age groups are 16 to 21 for the kids.
Okay.
And we have a strong partnership with the Police Athletic League. So we're doing a lot of our workshops in all the boroughs. And we use their youth programs as well as the programs that we have.
Okay.
But this has been going on for a while, so it's been pretty intense, and it's grown.
So, but you did pretty much the curriculum and
I ran it for a long time, and then 2 or 3 years ago, I trained other people to do what I do. And 2 people go in. One is a social worker, and the other is a performer. And they run the workshops, and they've done a great job.
Oh, that's wonderful. Teach me.
Well, what I keep saying to the community is, you need the cops. You don't want them to go away. You want them to perform in a particular way, and you love your kids mostly. I know I raised some, so kids are our kids. And you want them to do what they need to do so that they can live their lives safely. And so you have to support that relationship. You have to figure out how to do something with it. And people are very responsive to the program.
Okay, so but the cops that you have involved, I know you said you know a few. Is there a rotation of more cops every year or every few months, or what, or is it the same? How is that?
No,
what does that look like inside the NYPD? How many they get involved?
We probably have impacted like more than 1,000 cops. We've been doing this for a long time. And they choose who they want to send, a lot of times rookies. And then when we did we did presentations at the Apollo, there would be several thousand cops, people there from the community, and then we would put on stage a workshop. And everybody responded to this very positively.
Wow.
The cops also don't want to be the bad guys. I mean, they would like to walk through our communities and be spoken to and smiled at, and it's had an impact. It's made a difference.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't think that on, think about how they're talking about everything in the social media right now, especially with the cops. There's a lot of negative attitudes, and especially in people of color, against the cops. I mean, what happened not too long ago in Brooklyn, they shot someone that was mentally ill. and that's a big thing they're doing right now. And your program, you do this social, psychological something. You're going to explain to me, because you do mental health. You deal with that part of a population also. Could you tell me more about, because I've been to a couple of events at the Eastside Institute. So could you talk about the psychological part, mental health, that's involved in your program and relation?
Well, I mean, one thing, even without getting that deep, police officers, for the most part, don't want to be related to as demons. They would prefer to be related to as human beings. It's not as if our communities are saying, we don't want any police. That's a different statement from the responses when someone in the community is shot by a police officer and people feel like that didn't have to happen, or and are outraged and upset and so on and so forth about all of this. I mean, I got started in this when Sean Bell was shot 50 times by a cop. Coming out of an event, I think it was connected to he was about to get married.
He was getting married, yeah. He was going to get married.
And I'm an activist, and I had a very strong response to that. And I organized a lot of marches and protests, but I also realized that we had to go beyond protests. And as long as the community needed the police, we needed to figure out how to bridge that gap. I also knew a lot of police officers because I was in a lot of marches. I knew police officers who were in Black and Latino fraternal organizations and so on and so forth. And so we worked to come up with a way of bridging the tension and doing something about that and creating a safe environment where they would come to know the other. And one thing that the police officers often didn't sort of realize, and a lot of people don't, these kids, a lot of the kids in our communities are poor. They're struggling with things that young people should never, ever even have to deal with.
Exactly.
So and then the police officers talk about how upsetting it is, that they're out, they could be out, for 3-4 days in advance, right after the other, without being able to go home to their families and so on and so forth. So it humanizes one group to the other. And it's been effective, and it also gives both groups. In fact, people have reactions to both groups. There's antagonism towards the cops, and there are antagonisms towards young people who are, in the communities and in the streets. People don't understand them either. So it brought the two of them together. And I think in the process of working on this, it's made a big difference in other venues and other situations. It's a wonderful thing to do. I've trained a number of people to do it now, so I do less of it. But it's important because the community is not saying get rid of the cops. And our kids live with us.
Right.
So how do you navigate that? And that's what we've been doing, and training people to do it in other cities.
Yeah, but you're breaking ice through improv, which I call art, and just to break the ice, and because I guess probably when they're all in the same room together, they probably come with a lot of animosity, especially the kids, because they have this thing, they already think negative. So
they also come with a lot of curiosity.
And curiosity, because young people, if they don't know, and they're in a different environment. And I do believe that once you take a child, especially out of their environment, and something positive, it helps, and that's very important, which there's so many that do not have that opportunity, especially in the city, like you said, they stay right in their neighborhood, and they never have an opportunity to go outside their neighborhood. And our education system, they don't do field trips. I grew up in Ohio, but even back then, what's field trips? I think I was field tripped out. It seemed like it was one every week. And field trips, we left the city outside. We used to travel a lot. And that was very eye-opening and rewarding but you are able to see other people from different places and communicate with other people, and they're missing that in our Department of Education. They don't have vocational programs here. It's just
a lot of the schools in this country in poor communities of color, which I know more about, probably in some of the poor white communities, but definitely in poor communities of color, are dysfunctional. They're not well run. I think they may have, I'm sure they have teachers and guidance counselors who are committed to doing a good job, but institutionally they're often difficult to navigate. I've done outreach in schools, and the kids who come to my youth programs, they're in classes where they don't have books that allow them to navigate the classes that they're in. And I think that that's a political fight. I think it's a demand that has to come from the community, from parents and other people. These schools, they're a mess, and a lot of the schools in New York City are a mess.
They are horrible.
And when I work with our donors whose kids go to very, good schools in the suburbs and elsewhere, I've taken them on tours of our public school system, and they're like appalled at what they see.
I don't blame them. I was appalled when I went to school. I said, wait a minute, this is 2000, what? Wait a minute, I don't recognize this. And I've been all over the United States, and I've been in third world countries, and it's just, oh, come on.
Well, that's a political issue, to fight for public schools that work well and that are decent, and it's an ongoing fight.
Yeah, and plus they owe, I think it's about, what, $4 billion to the city, Department of Education, our governor. And that's a fight. I mean, I went to Albany a few times, giving them pink slips, putting them on their door, the governor's office. And I didn't understand that then, because that was probably my first year. And I said, and I started thinking about it. I said, why are we doing this? And then they had these book drives. And people were so happy about these book drives when they was getting these books. They said, oh, we have 5,000 and 10,000 books donated. And I said, oh, okay, that's great. But they were like, it was gold. But I didn't realize they really didn't have books. And there was a program they have, a workshop at UFT every year, and it was one of the former teachers. She did the workshop, and she brought boxes of books. And they pretty much were picture books, a lot of them. You should have seen those parents. They were like, you would think they had gold. They were like snatching and getting the books, and I said, what's wrong with them? They never seen. And there were picture books. I mean, kindergarten, first grade books with pictures, and they were grabbing these books like they'd never seen them before, but they never had. And I didn't realize it.
They want
that's
books
sad.
for their kids in the schools, and that's what's supposed to happen. We pay tax dollars, and the public school system should provide the young people with everything that they need, and they don't.
And they don't.
And that's not the parents' fault. Actually, that's a political fight to make sure the schools function in all communities in ways that meet the needs of the young people who are in them.
Exactly. You know. So let's go to this housing situation. NYCHA. New York City Housing Authority. I didn't know what, if you're not from here, NYCHA sounds like a kind of like a prison nightmare or something. You just say, what's NYCHA? NYCHA. And I kept hearing NYCHA. What is NYCHA? No one say what it is. Now I think everybody knows what NYCHA is now, because it's all on the news in 160 minutes. Covered and all the violations and things going on right now. What are you doing with NYCHA? What's your part in doing with NYCHA right now, working with NYCHA? About
maybe 5 years ago, people started calling me from the New York City Housing Authority, people whose kids were in our youth programs, adults that I knew and who were working with, and just people who knew me as a political person in the city. And they were complaining about the lack of heat, all the kinds of things that have sort of been talked about in the last year or so, and the dysfunctionality of public housing, and asking for support. So I started working with them and working to organize them to speak out in opposition to this and to come together and figure out how to fight back, push back, and make it more public, because it wasn't their shame, it was actually the shame of the government and the people who were responsible for providing them with housing. And there's just, I mean, the other thing that has happened in the midst of that is the country, in many ways, the political establishment has turned its back on public housing. So in Chicago, and various places in the country, they've blown up public housing with no plan for where the people who live there were to go. Still no plan. And there is a attack here in the city, in all the boroughs, on public housing, because the New York City Housing Authority, they sit on a lot of land. 650,000 people live in public housing in New York. And, you know, there are all kinds of views. If you live in Staten Island and you look out from your window, you know, you can see water and, you know, just it's kind of cool. And so the realtors want that. And oftentimes, unfortunately, the elected officials participate and are participating in the process of getting rid of the poor there. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I make up this timeline because I'm so busy I have no idea when anything happens. But they started to make plans in the city. The plan was to build in the empty spaces in the public housing projects. They were going to build these high-risers that wealthy white people from the country and around the world, wherever, were going to move in. And it was clear that that was an effort to get rid of the people who live there, because unfortunately we live still in a city where people don't live together in that way. So who was going to be impacted upon by that were the people who had lived in public housing. So I started to organize in the communities, in the housing developments here. People were worried about it. Plus they were getting evicted for all kinds of reasons, and if their kids committed a crime, which kids sometimes commit crimes, and they were sent away to, you know, juvenile institutions or even prison, but they were still underage, when they come back, a rule has been put in place that they can't move in. So
what?
Yes, your son or daughter, whoever, primarily young men, then they won't let them back into the housing project. So all this mess has been evolving, and bit by bit, because of the All Stars Project, our program's relationship to the communities, people were reaching out. And over the past 3-4 years, we've been building a movement to protest and give pushback to what's going on there, the efforts to displace people, and just making it more public, because I learned a long time ago, never have a quiet fight. If you're going to have a fight, and if it's definitely around the issue of justice, you let everybody know. And I've been organizing all over the city in public housing since then, and people have developed a voice. It's still very difficult. When I first started working with them, they were giving people who lived in public housing some like $10,000 or whatever, maybe even $5,000, to move out of their public housing and move to Buffalo or something ridiculous. Not that I don't like Buffalo, but you can't just go and move to Buffalo. And then people would be stranded there, and then they realized that they were being taken, that you can't do this, and you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're stuck somewhere and you don't have the capacity to get out. So I have been, and other people have been attending to this in other ways, organizing people in public housing to fight back, to stand up and say, no, I'm not going, to work together in ways, and to make things public. I think that's really important. We've gone, in Harlem, for example, some of the political people were saying that they couldn't do anything because a lot of white people had moved into Harlem and they didn't want to live with the housing projects. So I sent people out to knock on the doors of the white homeowners and say to them that this is what we've been told. I mean, these people didn't even pay any attention to the public housing. It wasn't because of them. It's because the Real Estate Board of New York is paying a lot of money, distributing it throughout amongst politicians, people that we've put in office and elsewhere, because all these bodies want to take New York City back. And we can't allow that. It doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the people who live here.
Okay, but wait a minute. So, but the NYCHA was started because of low income, correct? Because it's always, New York is a place that
everybody
the rent
lives.
is too high, okay? Yes. As they say, the rent is too damn high. And it's always probably been that way. So they found, okay, in other cities, it's called projects, okay? So New York City is the NYCHA, okay? And that's what you call your NYCHA. But it's not just African Americans and people of color. There's a whole mix of people.
Yes, but it's grown to be probably predominantly Black and Latino throughout the cities. And there are, I mean, in Staten Island and other places, there are white people who live in it, but it's, I don't know what the numbers are, the proportion, but it seems, it definitely has grown to be where a lot of people of color are. But I don't even, and the white people who live there deserve to live there. Nobody deserves to be run out of their housing with no place to go. And the places where there have been moves on the particular housing projects, people end up in shelters. It's like there is no plan. But the real estate people want that land. And they've also, if you look into donations, that elected officials are getting in the city, some portion of them, for too many of the elected officials, some portion of what they're getting is coming from the Real Estate Board of New York.
It has to be, because you're looking at, you know, constantly, you know, I live Soho, NoHo. When I moved, and it's been about 7 years, it's just grown like crazy. It's not just NYU taking over.
Yes,
there's a lot of other development, and it's just like, and it's in every borough. And I remember as a teenager, always came here as a baby every year, shop and go to shows and whatever, and worked on Wall Street as an adult every now and then. But I stayed over in Clinton Hills. Now I don't even recognize it now, you know, and that's going on in all the boroughs. So I just, it's like they built this for people of color, but they live in horrible situations. I mean, their homes are horrible.
You're talking about public housing.
It's not just public housing. I've been some places where they're paying, I mean,
lots of
Central
money.
Park West, and they're paying a lot of money. I'm like, do you guys ever think about painting, or what about this hole up here? And,
well, if you live in public housing, who's supposed to paint are the people who run public housing. And that's very, very important. And the people who live in public housing, that's their house. I grew up in a city where everybody in my family lived in one of the public housing buildings. And who's supposed to take care of the property are the people who are hired to do so. And that means that the city and the state needs to invest so that people are able to live in decent places. So I
think they need to have the laws, okay, because the landlords themselves, if you have housing preservation, the building departments come in and they get false inspections.
Yes, like
and like they just did when we were talking about what the NYCHA thing was on the news. Some of those people, no, it's not just no heat. They had no toilets, they had no stove, they had no running water. There was places they didn't even have running water.
Well, that's changed a lot. I mean, most of the housing projects now around the country are more advanced than that, but you still have to keep up.
You still have to keep up the properties too.
Yes, and people get paid to do that, and they have to be held accountable.
But they're not. That's why they're getting away with it. I mean, they had it on news. The woman last week was at NYCHA. Her place was just, the walls and the ceiling was coming down. I mean, and the mold, and it's a health hazard.
Well, the reason for that is because what the people in public housing have to do, which I've spent time, and people are eager to do, even though it's a pain in the neck, you have to hold the elected officials responsible. There is public housing for a reason, and they're supposed to make sure that what gets done in that housing project gets done. They get money from the federal government for people to be able to live in these places. People get paid for people, you know, to be able to run it.
They're getting paid for that, and then the conditions are horrible.
Well, that's because the cities have neglected public housing around the country because they really don't give a hoot about the people who live there. And so the response of the people who live there has to be a lot to, it's a political response. You get rid of the people who don't do their jobs. People end up relating to the people who live, the residents, as if they are the people who mess up public housing. But if you're not taking care of the grounds and making sure that the things that exist in a house work, if you don't do painting, if you don't treat people there like they're human beings and do the jobs that you're supposed to do, and that's the requirement, who's supposed to be on top of that, are the people who pay the people who work for public housing. If that's not happening, then it's going to be a mess, unless, you know, you have a political fight. So it's not, everybody in my family at some point lived in public housing, and at some point in this process, it was taken care of. In New York City, public housing has been deeply, deeply, deeply neglected. And my insistence to the residents is that they have to have a real fight with them.
Is this been how long? I mean, is this what, 20 years, 40 years? How long this been going on? Or is
when it
finally
first started,
caught up? People is catching up on people now? What? How long has this been going on?
Well, the neglect of the poor have probably been going on since the world began.
Okay, well, that too.
When it was first built,
Well, I mean,
my family moved into public housing in Pennsylvania, a small town, when it was first built, and it was a big deal because it was moving out of tenements, and not just black people, but white people and everybody else, into housing that supposedly was being taken care of by the people who were being paid to do that. There's been a lot of neglect relative to the public housing in this city and around the country for a host of reasons. One is that people aren't doing their jobs, not the people who live there, the people who are getting paid to do that, and they're not being supervised. So that's the city's responsibility for the ways in which they've been run down. People are being neglected, and the housing is being neglected, and that's a political fight. And so the chipping of the walls in public housing when somebody else is supposed to be painting them is a big deal. And if if the elected officials don't fight for that kind of thing, it's not going to happen. It's not like the people in the public housing are taking, you know, something and chipping the paint off the wall. It has to do with the neglect of the people who are getting paid to take care of it. And for a while, for many, many years, it was related to, public housing was related to in a whole other way. In the last 20 or so years, it's been deeply neglected. And now the neglect, I think, has been extended because in various cities, people want that land. They want the land, and they don't want poor people living there.
So, I mean, where do they think, because, you know, on one block in New York City, people realize you might have 100,000 people or 50,000 more people living on a block, you know, in a high rise. Where are these people supposed to go?
I think they don't care. I think that they want them out, and they want the land, and they've not gone beyond that. I think the residents of the city, whether they're rich or poor, middle class, black, Latino, white, whatever, Asian, that's who should be caring, because we should care about each other. I care about what's happening there, and I'm organizing people to give pushback and expose the ways in which they're treated less than human. I mean, public housing saved a lot of people in this country over years and decades. From the white poor to the black and Latino and Asian poor, that's where we had to live. And it's supposed to be invested in by the federal government, the state, and the local government. And now in this city, Mayor de Blasio and others are complaining because the federal government isn't doing their jobs. Well, he's not doing his job because his demand should be on the federal government and the state government to do their jobs. And, you know, it's an outrageously useless fight amongst them. The issue is if you care about the people that you're governing. And when you don't, the people who you're governing have to stand up and put some demands on you and figure out a way to run you out of office if you're not doing what it is that you're doing, that you're supposed to be doing.
It's surprising how people just, you know, passing the buck because the woman that was the head of NYCHA, well, she stepped down.
Shola Olatoye, who lied and stayed on for months after lying about lead paint. She should have been fired immediately. And I think it's because of the movement that we've built in this city, exposing what was happening, what she did, that she and the mayor were covering this up, that she ended up getting dumped. And that's wonderful. And the mayor, in my opinion, should pay a price for that because he kept her on for a long time.
But you know, that lead paint didn't start when they hired her. That's my whole point. It didn't start when she came on board. They knew this way before then, and I believe she was just baited, was a bait. She's a black woman, she's a woman. Let's just put it that way. We don't know women in leadership.
I'm not that kind.
You're not that kind?
I'm a woman. And it would make me happier if a black woman decided to do this or a white man.
Yeah, but she should have been on board too. She should have, you know, did more. But my whole thing is she lied, but that lie was already there when she was placed there.
No, her lie was an independent lie. Her lie was a lie when she recognized that there was lead paint and she decided not to report it. She couldn't report it when she hadn't known that it was there. Once she found out it was there, if you care about the families there, the little kids who end up getting brain damaged, you can't walk away from it. So I think that anybody who knew about it, who lied about its presence, needed to be held accountable.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It didn't start with her. It's a whole lot of people involved there, and it just didn't. That lead paint probably been there forever, for a long, long time before she came on board, and no one said anything. They just totally just covered it up, and which is a lot of this is covering up, which the government should be responsible for it and stop blaming.
No, I think everybody should be responsible for it, but she was getting paid more money than I've ever seen. She had a job. I'm not willing to protect her.
Oh, I wouldn't protect her. I'm not protecting her. Well, my point is, it was there before she came. And that's the point.
She made a decision.
And then she should have just said, hey, look, I'm here. I'm not taking this, and I don't care. I need to help these people. Would you want to live there? You know, and that's the whole thing, how people, and you know, especially some of the politicians themselves, they know these situations and they're willing to put human beings and arms away.
Yes, and other people should not participate in it.
Yeah.
Right. So
and that's the whole thing. But you see, it's like a domino effect of the criminality, of especially the housing here. It's just totally.
I think that people have a reason to run somebody else for mayor who might do something different, other than what de Blasio has done, because he also knew, at least he knew. We know he at least knew after she knew, and he didn't do it. I'm not trying to protect him. I'm also not trying to protect her. I'm saying the whole administration has been complicit in this, and it's problematic. And she bore the brunt of it, and that's too bad. As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to endangering the lives of little kids or anybody, of human beings, somebody needs to pay a price.
Exactly.
And so she's paid it, and if people want to if they want to respond to de Blasio, they should unseat him.
Well, look like, you know, I don't know. I'm in the room, and I'm just like, you knew this, you know, and you knew this, and you knew it, and you're letting it go on, and there's no excuse for it. Because things like that, the mold, whatever, all those problems. They've been there for years. If you walk through those places when they were showing it on the news, I said, this just happened last month and it happened yesterday. They've been there for years, and you have people come in there and do the investigation and say, oh, it's okay, or said it's not okay on paperwork, and nobody did anything about it. And so it is a string of people in the administration that have been following this thing, and it's embedded in the system of being corrupt.
And this was her job.
In her job, and everybody under her job, and everybody on that line, it was their job. Someone sat there and said, I see this. I don't care if it was
She signed off on it, honey. So even if they knew
she was my boss and it came across my desk, I would have said, no, wait a minute. No, hey, look, you made a mistake, didn't you? Okay, because you need to tell me you made a mistake, because if you tell me that, I will understand it. But I'm reporting you. I would not sit there and just say nothing, but I'm just talking about the people that didn't say anything.
She didn't, Shola, it's not that Shola said nothing, Shola lied. Mm-hmm. If I have a job and I go do it and I lie, even if my boss knows something else, I'm the person who bears the brunt of that.
Exactly.
Because I lied. So that seemed to be fine with her. I mean,
it's just unbelievable how cruel people are, but you're talking about other people's lives, human lives.
Yes, kids are brain damaged.
Those kids be brain damaged. They're sick. I mean, I lobbied for. I'm a rare disease survivor myself. I lobbied for rare disease, and the thing I learned about health, it is so much in with our environment, what we're eating, and everything else, just naturally, than to be put in a place that is. That would affect your health.
You. Yes, right, by virtue
of
being there.
For the rest of your life, and I just don't get it why they're sitting there and say, well, we're talking about, we're trying to get this rule, this regulation. I'm saying, what? No, you get some money, you go fix it and go get some people, go in there and fix it. There's no excuse, there's no, where are you coming from, all these excuses, and you're not addressing their problem, because that's a public health problem you're talking about right now. Okay, so.
Well, I think the power of her removal came from the masses. I think the people in the city reading about what she had done is what people responded to, and that's very strong. And I agree with you, they should continue to respond to things that are being done to them that's harmful, and everybody else should be supporting them. And we should get rid of the people who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. If, in fact, there are people politicians right now taking money from the Real Estate Board of New York in order to participate or allow and underwrite the expansion of wealthy people taking over the land that housing projects sit on, we should dump the elected officials who are participating in that.
Exactly.
And it's a piece of work, and it's an important piece of work. And our community has to be supported to grow so that they're able to do it, but there has to be leadership.
There have to be leadership, and they have to know and how to get involved and participate themselves, because some probably just don't know and don't know how
I'm a community organizer, and there are lots of people, for example, who work with me all over the city who live in NYCHA relative to public housing. They've gone out and collected close to 20,000 signatures in opposition to what's happening to people in the communities and their communities. There are a lot of people out there, but you have to have leadership. That's why we loved Dr. King and Malcolm and the whole kit and caboodle, because they were out there saying, I'm going to lead you, I got your back, and that's what they need. And when you do that, I mean, this movement in opposition to a lot of what's happening with NYCHA, from NYCHA residents, has grown because they don't feel like they're doing this by themselves. They have the support of lots of folks. And I mean, that's what happened. Dr. King came along, and it's not like everything that he fought for didn't exist before he came along, but we had leadership.
You have to have
and
leadership.
The leadership
we're
is not coming.
A lot of leadership.
Right, well then we have to lead. People who care about this have to lead.
Well, you are a leader, honey. Because
Well,
you get work done. You get it done. There's no, there's no passing. Nobody's not gonna mess with you for sure.
well,
Once you get on board. So that's just wonderful. But I said, God, what is this NYCHA thing? I kept hearing. I said, oh my God, this is horrible. Those people, they're killing these people. They know they're killing these people.
well, it's scary when you're working to put food on the table for your kids and figure out what you have to do. It's frightening to be a mother, to think, if I step out, am I going to lose my house? Where are my kids going to go? I mean, so you have to have an effort that you can be a part of. And I think there are lots, I mean, speaking about the Black and Latino community, there are a lot of us who came from poor communities, who have, by virtue of people dying in the streets during the 60s, who put their lives on the line, created opportunities for us to grow. And as far as I'm concerned, I have an obligation to those people and also to our communities to follow in their footsteps. Because I wouldn't have been in college had Dr. King and Malcolm and the Black Panthers and the Young Lords.
Me either, because I went through, oh God, I'm from Ohio. KKK Country USA, that's
Yes.
what I call it.
Right.
I was out there in the late 60s in Detroit and my city, the riots and all that.
And there were leaders.
And there were leaders. I mean, we were
sacrifice.
just actually, and it was, we got things done. I mean, but it was a lot of work, and somehow over the years it kind of just dropped off or somewhere. We had an African-American president that wasn't supported. You know, when you're in that position, I don't know, just do it. You know, and it's just...
Well, I mean, in some ways I understand why people don't just do it, because a lot of people who just did it, they got their brains blown out. There's like risks that people take in just doing it.
Yeah.
And that's a real deal. A fight where you challenge the status quo is a serious fight, especially if it advances.
Yeah.
And so the people who decide to do that should be applauded, and they should be supported. And we've done that in a lot of different situations, not just the Black community, but other communities, and we have to keep growing. And also, all kinds of communities need to come together and fight injustice, no matter who it's hurting.
Thank you, Dr. Fulani.
Oh, thank you. This was wonderful.
And thank you, audience. And come back to see me, Talk with Dianna Survivor. I'm on Mondays morning, 10 to 11 on Channel 2. You can see me online on your cell phone, mnn.org. And have a nice day, be safe, and help someone. Do something nice for someone. Thank you.
Terrific.